Hey guys, it's Christine. Welcome here to my channel. Today, I'm going to be talking to the newbie homeschoolers about what I wish I had known, a little bit of perspective and hindsight, and sharing some tips for things that maybe I would have done differently if I had known. So welcome here. I'm Christine, a homeschooling mom of 3. If this is your first time here, I live in New Zealand and have been homeschooling for, I don't know how many years, a few years now. I was also homeschooled, so it's something I really love and enjoy talking about. Today's video is part of the Homeschool Show and Tell collaboration, which was founded by Abby and Jessica. They have their own channels. Abby, Rooted and Rest, Jessica from the Waldock Way, both amazing homeschool moms with a wealth of knowledge. So you can always go check out their channels. I have them linked down below, and there will be a playlist linked down below filled with other videos on the same topic from other homeschool moms. If you are a homeschooler in the YouTube space, you are welcome to join in on this and just contact Abby about getting your video added to the playlist. She brings out a new topic every month and we talk about that, and it's just really helpful to get different perspectives from different people because we know that we don't all homeschool the same. So I think this is going to be really interesting to watch these videos because we all have such different experiences when it comes to homeschooling, and you know, we evolve and we change and we get more comfortable and more confident, and so that's what I'm going to speak to, things that I have learned. I've got my phone here that I'm looking at because I wrote notes down because I don't remember anything these days. Okay, so I've just written a few things down, not tons, but a few things down that I wish I had known and may have changed had I known those things. So the first one is that while it might sound good to buy a curriculum that you're then going to pass down for every child, there's a likelihood you're not going to use the same curriculum for every child. And that's simply because they learn differently, and that curriculum may not work for that child, or you may not enjoy teaching that curriculum and therefore you're not going to use it. And with that knowledge, it would probably save you a bit of money. So think about that when you are making curriculum purchases. Just because it works for your child now and you're like, oh great, I'll spend this money and then I'll use it with all my other kids, doesn't mean you actually will. I did that with quite a bit of digital curriculum, and I wish now, if I had known that, I would have bought the physical curriculum so that I could on-sell it. But because it's digital, I can't because of copyright, obviously. And I spent a fair bit of money on certain curriculum doing that, and I have regrets just because of that. Other stuff that I did buy in physical form, like All About Reading, I have used it with more than one kid in bits and pieces, but I can resell that, and so it doesn't faze me. But yeah, there were digital resources like, I'm thinking specifically of, I think it's Letters and Sounds and Ready to Read from Gather Round, which I used with my son, and I think I used it a little bit with my one daughter, but it was not my favorite, and I won't use it again, and it's kind of like because I can't use it anymore and I can't sell it. So that's something just to be considerate of. What I wish I had known and what I wish I had done differently was to lean into my strengths more. So as homeschool moms, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and some of the strengths that people have can be labeled as a negative thing if somebody else has a weakness in that area because it doesn't work for them. And so, for instance, using traditional homeschool curriculum, for some people that doesn't work well because it is not their strength. For other people, it does work well because it is their strength. But when you're listening to the voices of many voices in a community, you can be persuaded to think that your strengths are negative things because they don't necessarily work for everybody else. So I know that kind of might sound funny, but I wish I had been more confident in the things that really made my heart sing and worked well for me, despite the fact that they're not necessarily popular in the current homeschool community. And I think that it's only been in like the last year and a half that I've really started to do that. And now our homeschool just like flows so well. And I just really love it. I mean, I've always enjoyed homeschooling, but I just really, really love it now. And I feel very confident in what we're doing. And I don't know if you can learn to do that any sooner than what I have, because it's kind of just something you have to learn over time and get your footing in. But I do wish that I just sort of like listened to my own intuition a little bit more, instead of believing that some of the things that I do aren't necessarily the best. And another way I can put this is in more of like a general life sense, and this might make some people laugh. But I have always been labeled as talkative. Surprise, surprise. The woman who makes YouTube videos of herself just chatting for a living. I was always labeled as talkative, and often it was said in a very negative way. Not necessarily by those who are closest to me and love me the most, but in a generic sense, it was definitely said as a negative way. Often it was said by people who are more naturally quiet. And I was always very self-conscious of it. I felt like me being a chatty person was a really negative thing, that I just needed to learn to shut up, and that talking was negative. And yet, even to this day, one of my favorite things to do is just sit and chat with a good friend, or, you know, like my siblings or my mom or whatever, for hours. I can do it for hours, and I love it. It fills up my soul. I love chatting. But I love chatting in a conversation. I don't like being the only person talking. Obviously, that's not a healthy thing. And I do think that that's something I still need to work on. And it's something we all need to learn, is to be able to be a really good listener, as well as somebody who can contribute to a conversation. But it wasn't until my adult years, and like fairly far on into my adult years, that I really learned that talking is not necessarily in and of itself a bad thing. Being a chatty person is not a bad thing. In fact, there are people who appreciate chatty people because it fills the awkward silences that they don't know how to fill. So there are things that some people will view as a weakness, and yet they can be used for immense good. If you can talk and be a good listener, if you can chat and breathe life into a conversation and to people and encourage them and lift them up, then being chatty isn't a bad thing. In fact, it is a strength. It wasn't until I went and did my tertiary education, it was actually in nursing, and we did a course on teaching, because a huge part of nursing is teaching. You know, you teach student nurses as well. And so we did a course on teaching, and I did really, really well in that course. And part of it was because of my oral presentation. I was able to share things well and clearly, and in an engaging manner. And that's something that comes very naturally to me. It's not something I have to work hard at. I can speak well as far as like improvising. I can just get up and do things. I don't know why. I think that it is a God-given gift. I take absolutely no credit for it, because I know I can work on it, but it's not something I have to work on, if that makes sense. So it wasn't until then that I learned that I had that strength, and that speaking and talking isn't inherently bad or wrong when it is used well. So all that big long story to say that your strengths in homeschooling may be somebody else's weaknesses, but that doesn't mean that they're a bad thing. Lean into them and use them to breathe life into your homeschool, and your kids will thank you for it one day, and you'll be happier for it. Instead of fighting against that, see the things that you were good at and use them. And often they help to like fill the voids of other weaknesses you might have, because you can figure out a way to make it work well. Okay, another thing that this kind of like leads into that same topic, but the other thing is that schedules are not evil. And I really, when I started homeschooling my kids, I was like so scared to like do much of a schedule or a rhythm or routine, or like openly admit that, because it was so anti what you were hearing in the current homeschool culture of like, no, we're doing slow, gentle learning. no academic work until the age of 6, and we just do rhythms. We don't do scheduling. And there's nothing wrong with homeschooling in that manner. That works for your family. That works for you. That does not work for me. It does not work for my family. I need schedules, I need rhythm, and I need routine because it's what keeps me disciplined. And my kids need it too. They need expectations. And so I wish I had just wholeheartedly embraced the routine and the schedules. And it doesn't mean that I'm married to it. It doesn't mean that there's not flexibility. I've spoken about this a lot on my channel. You can have both. It doesn't have to be rigid scheduling that has no room for any change or grace for your children or life circumstances. It does not have to be that way. It can be both. And scheduling keeps my sanity. It makes me happy. It's like, I look forward to the morning tea break that I know is going to happen between 10 and 10:30. I expect it. My kids expect it, and it's fantastic. So in hindsight, I would have just embraced it. And I don't know why I was reluctant, because I had my babies on schedules from the time they were born, basically, and it worked so well for us. And again, I know that there's very polarizing, opinions on those subjects, as far as co-sleeping and gentle parenting and, scheduling your baby and feeding on a rhythm. And yet you can actually marry a lot of those things as well. I mean, I have friends who have done both, who co-slept but also had a routine. I think it's just so silly that we have everything in these categories and bam, 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 and everyone fights over everything. Just pick what works for you and go with that, guys. And I wish I had done that sooner when it came to scheduling in my homeschool. Okay, I kind of covered this, but I'm going to say it on its own point, and that is to do what works. Namely, block out all the millions of opinions that are on social media and do what works for your family. I tried to be a Charlotte Mason homeschooler at the beginning. I really did. I wanted to do the nature study and the feast of things, and we do still do some of that. But it's in a much smaller scale, and it's according to how I enjoy doing it, not what Charlotte Mason says and how she does it. And there's nothing wrong with what Charlotte Mason homeschool is fantastic. I think it's a wonderful philosophy. I love the concept of it, but the execution of it in our home just doesn't work out the same way. And so I would just say it's not necessarily popular to use more traditional homeschooling curriculum anymore, but if it works, it works. Do what works for you. Don't worry about fitting in on Instagram. They don't care. They're not your kids. Do what works for you and your kids. Do what makes you happy in your homeschooling. Embrace it, enjoy it, and don't worry about the opinions of others, because it doesn't matter. All that matters is that it works for you and your family. And then the last point I have here, I just looked at it, I've already forgotten. Oh, that is that it gets easier. It does get easier. Just like when you're a parent, I don't want to say it gets easier, because parenting doesn't really get easier. Every stage has its challenge, but I think you get a little more confident and some things get easier. There's always going to be new challenges in homeschooling, but I feel like you can work through them easier than you did right at the beginning. It's less overwhelming. Let's put it that way. I remember when I started homeschooling and all of the curriculum options and everything, I was just whoa, I felt like I'd been smacked in the face. And this is coming from a second generation homeschooler. So homeschooling was a very, I knew about it. I knew how it worked. It wasn't a new concept to me. I knew I wanted to homeschool my kids for forever. And yet I still felt so overwhelmed by it. So I cannot imagine what it's like for those of you who come into homeschooling with no background in it and don't know anybody who has homeschooled their kids or anything like that. It is hard. I understand it's super overwhelming. And I don't have that full lack of homeschooling support, basically. But that wore off fairly quickly. And I don't have that same level of overwhelm. When I am interested in homeschooling curriculum now and I want to look for new options, I know what to look for. I know how my kids learn. I know the kind of curriculum that I enjoy. I know the common names in the homeschool world. And that part of it gets a lot easier, I think. you never know what life's going to throw at you, as far as like challenges and everything like that. So that aspect might not necessarily get easier, but just sort of understanding how you work as a family definitely does. So just wanted to say that. It does get easier. It does get less overwhelming, and you do find your rhythm and your groove. I will say it took us to like maybe the 3rd year to really like iron out a lot of the things and to ease into it and enjoy homeschooling. So yeah, I hope that this video was helpful. Don't forget to go and check out the playlist full of other videos. I'm sure you'll find them really helpful and fun. If you do have any questions for me, do leave them down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
What if the world had more of your smile? What if the wind could spread your love? What if your sweetness could reach everyone? There'd be no wars.